Good evening, and this is a general presentation, and it represents an introduction to the theoretical computer science course, which is the code is CSG411 and the acronym is TCS, that will be held at Innopolis University next autumn semester by myself. So before introducing you to what it means, theory of computation, what computation is what the theory behind computation is, it is necessary to give a little bit historical and mathematical overview, which I think is very important to understand the relevance of the concept that will be introduced in the course. We will talk about paradoxes. Okay, I don't know, many of you maybe you already know the Barber Paradox, but for the people who doesn't know, I think it's very important to be discussed. So let's suppose that in a village we have a barber that we will call B, okay? And B shaves all the villagers who don't shave themselves, but he doesn't shave any of the villagers who do shave themselves, okay? So this is how the paradox is presented. And the question is, does B shave B or not? So let's try together to answer these questions. Okay. So we have a barber that is shaving only those that are not shaving themselves. This is going to be a logical paradox, and probably you can already understand why. So let's assume that B is shaving B. Okay. This is our assumption. The other assumptions that we got from the original statement is that B does not shave any villager X where X shave X, so himself. So the logical conclusion from these two assumptions is that B does not shave B. Okay. So let's suppose that B does not shave B now. So we have two assumptions. So B does not shave B. And the other assumption that we have from the original statement is that B shaves every villager X where X does not shave X. So the conclusion is that B shave B. So we present it here in a little bit more formal way. So you can present this paradox in many ways. You can formalize it in logic, and we didn't use the mathematical symbols to make it simple, but we used this, the normal language. But still we formalized very well the paradox. But I don't know if for some of you may appear complicated. If you just think a little bit about the paradox, you will easily understand that you reach a contradiction. Okay, this is a very well-known paradox. In the end, if you think about it 5 minutes, you will understand that there is something is not working. You really this assumption leads to a paradox. So there is a contradiction. Okay, so when you are confronted with a contradiction, it means that there is something that you have to give up in your assumption. Okay. Basically, this story, this paradox, once you logically formalized it, it clearly shows that such a barber cannot exist. So you cannot have a barber operating in the way we declared. Okay, this is why we reach a paradox. Our vocabulary, so natural language vocabulary, is usually very ambiguous. It really depends on the natural language, but some languages are better, but usually natural languages are very ambiguous. So especially when you want to declare something about the truth. So when you say it is true, it applies to. So you usually, using natural language, reach a contradiction. Every time you try to declare, most of the time you try to declare something precisely about the truth of some statement. So what is a paradox? A paradox is an apparently true statement that at some point seems to lead to a logical contradiction or to a situation which contradicts the common intuition. So most of the time in history, paradoxes have been very important because they usually led to advances in science, philosophy and mathematics, because usually paradoxes are capable to put the light spots on gaps in formalization in mathematics and in word understanding. So every time we had a paradox in history, you see that consequently to that paradox that has been discussed for centuries, at some point some people revealed that there was some missing understanding of the word in the previous theory, in the previous conceptualization of the truth and of the things. So paradoxes are very important. Every time they emerge, they usually emerge when a paradigm shift occurs in science, but in philosophy before. So when there are two social systems that are competing with each other, so there are two different visions of the world that are competing, like, for example, the heliocentric or geocentric world of the universe. So is the sun or the earth at the center of the solar system? So that's a time in history where you had a paradigm shift. Usually before the paradigm shift, before the common and the widespread acceptance of the new paradigm, there are many paradoxes around, and scientists and philosophers are always very keen to discuss. One very famous paradox is the time-traveling paradox. So when basically you saw this in many movies, probably, and certainly novels. So you have a time traveler going back to the past, and he murders the grandfather before basically his parent or her parent was born. And so you understand that this is a paradox, because you don't understand how the person actually could be on this planet if he killed his grandfather. So in cinema and literature, you have so much exploitation of this plot, because it's nice, I mean, for fiction. But paradoxes are not just about fiction. They have been used so much in history, and I will give you a short overview of how they've been used in science, in music, etc. Just another example, one of the most famous examples that give you an understanding of how the natural language is ambiguous and is always inappropriate to express formalization and mechanical things. So there is this Epimenides, which is a citizen of Crete, and is famous because he said that all the citizens of Crete, they lie, they always lie, they lie all the time. So this is another semantic paradox, okay? Because if what he said was true, then it was a lie. And if what he said was false, then it was not a lie. If you think 5 minutes about this, you really understand and reach the conclusion that, I mean, there is another contradiction here, easily. So Epimenides is from the city of Knossos in Crete, and he lived around the 7th and 6th century before Christ. So the history of paradoxes and the history of computation is very long. In my understanding, paradoxes are just the moment in history where we have to put our attention to see how everything developed. But I mean, we are not talking about computation yet here, of course. But if you understand that in all these paradoxes there is a circular and self-referral reasoning, and if you know recursion, which has a widespread use in computer science, in programming, so recursive functions, etc., you understand very, very quickly that there is a strong connection between paradoxes, circularity, self-referral, recursion, and computer science. Indeed, this concept of circularity, recursion, etc., they have been explored in all history for thousands of years in language, literature, music, mathematics, art, and of course computing. As we are mostly interested in computing, of course. But before giving some concept of recursion in computing, I want to show you how briefly many of the most important authors on the planet, like the Argentinian Borges, he used paradox very, very, very often. This quote that I'm not going to read, but you can of course read by yourself, it's not a paradox, but you can, if you're really interested in this, I'm just of course giving you hints. But if you are interested in this, you can use Google and look for paradoxes, Borges, and you will find many of his quotes and books. And of course, it's always a good reading. You can find. I'm not sure if you can find Borges translated in Russian, but you can find, of course, in English and in many other languages. This is the very famous visual paradox. This is Hesker, is a Dutch artist. Is basically contemporary artist. He passed away in 1972. And this is the waterfall, the imaginary waterfall. Is just one of his many visual paradoxes. And of course, you understand that he is playing with perspective. There is something wrong. It takes 1 minute or less to understand that this building simply cannot exist. Okay. Are we taking questions only at the end, or I mean, if there are any questions now, I can stop, and because otherwise probably we are putting too much information, and I'm happy to answer questions now.
So there are no questions at the moment, but well, I'll ask the attendees. Guys, if you have any questions right now, we encourage you to type them in the questions box. So Professor is ready to answer them. So
yeah, because now we are moving towards, yeah.
A little bit. Well, there are no questions.
Okay, we can go on. Maybe we can take
yeah,
questions at the end.
Yeah, they say not yet.
Okay,
you can go on.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. So this is another advice. This book, this is one of the latest editions, because this is a 1979 book by Douglas Oswater. It's called Gödel Eskerbach, an eternal golden braid. It's very important that you see in the title of the book that there is a mathematician, an artist, a graphic artist, and a musician. And this is because this book is a fantastic book. I think it's one of the most important books I read in my computer science education. So it's not a textbook at university. It's something that you should read. The guy is a living guy. I mean, this Douglas Oswater has been awarded a few years ago a PhD an honorary PhD in Bologna, and he gave like 12 lectures. He was there for 3 months because his wife was Italian. Unfortunately, the wife passed away, but so he knows. He's very often in Italy, and it's an American. And I think you should read this to understand the concept of self-referral, circularity, and recursion in nature in general before computing. The problem of this book is that it's a big one and it's not easy. It took me a couple of years to be read, and it took me about 10 years to understand most of the concept. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start. I mean, it's always a good read to really understand what is behind these concepts. And of course, circularity is always common in comics and in comedies. Like here, then you have the boss, the nasty boss. No, you know, I don't know if you know these comics. And there is this boss that is very upset. And can anyone tell me why everyone is always late for my staff meetings? And this nice lady says, but because the first 10 minutes are always about this stupid stuff, like why are people late? No? So you see circularity again and again here. Here we are. A little bit of history of mechanical reasoning. So starting from paradoxes and starting from the understanding that we cannot easily formalize and describe the world using natural language, and so people decided to go towards the development of formal languages, so logical, mathematical languages able to capture hopefully better the reality around us. But we will discover a little bit today during the course, and you can read about this, of course, elsewhere, that even with formal languages, even with mathematical languages, we still cannot describe precisely the reality. And this is very interesting. This is one of the major advancements of the last century in math and understanding. That came pretty much at the same time of the development of quantum mechanics. So the last century was extremely important to understand the limitation of human reasoning and understanding, and the tool we have to analyze the universe. So we can go back as far as more than 2,000, about 2,500 years ago, with the ancient Greek philosopher, with Aristotle, that he used to. Okay, you probably know syllogism, and syllogism are always connected to Aristotle because he was one of the first people in history writing something about this. And so he was working on logical deduction that can be explained via inference rules. So very famous, the Aristotle syllogism. So every human is mortal. Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. So this is one of the first attempts of formally and logically reasoning about truth. Another Greek is Euclid, pretty much living at the same time. And he was reducing geometry to axioms, and all the rest was derived by rules. You know that the Euclid axioms have been challenged many times through history, and indeed some of them were challenged enough to be found incomplete, and so you have non-conventional geometry, alternative geometry that came out from modification of his axioms, etc. So this is another important step toward mechanical reasoning. So this is a very, very famous, you should know this guy. This is a Persian mathematician, astronomer, geographer, living about okay, it is not clear, but more or less about 718 and 850 after Christ. So both the words algebra and algorithm are stemming from his work and this name. In particular, algorithm, it comes from algorithm. So this widespread use of algorithm word today is actually from a Persian mathematician. Okay, so it's from Persian. This is very interesting. I mean, and this is a national idol in Persia, actually in Iran. So, okay, there is a big gap. Of course, we don't have time now to discuss and mention all the important people who contributed towards mechanical reasoning and computation. So there is a big jump. You know, you are jumping probably 1,000 years each slide. There is much more than this. We cannot, of course, describe all details. But also Newton was describing the motion of objects and planets, reducing this to actions, so physical actions and laws. And Leibniz is another mathematician and very famous logic. To some extent, the modern conception of computer science may be dated back to his work. Calculemus is a famous quote from Leibniz. There is a much longer quote in Latin, but usually in literature, people just use the last word because it's much simpler than mentioning a big paragraph in Latin, and it's calculemus. So let us calculate. So he was probably the first one in history, or is the first famous mathematician in history talking about calculation and mechanical reasoning in the way we understand it today. So we are very close to the present date. In late 19th century, many mathematicians are working on codifying laws or reasoning. So some of this will be known by people who studied logic. People like Boole, De Morgan are very famous. You always study their work at university or at school. And there are other two guys very important for what we are saying today, and they are Whitehead and Russell. They are two British philosophers and mathematicians. You can see the picture actually. These two guys are basically contemporary because Whitehead passed away in 1947 and Russell very recently in 1970. So these are late pictures of their life. They are very important. They are very famous. Of course, Russell is more famous than Whitehead because he wrote so much about philosophy, history, politics, and not only logic. But in the period of this period, 1910, 1913, so basically slightly before First World War, they attempted to, they actually wrote a big 3 volumes work of 2,000 pages, and they tried to axiomatize the mathematical reason. They tried to define all the mathematical entities, like numbers, using logic, and they wanted to derive mathematical truth by using just rules of inference. And they claimed that their work was complete and consistent. We will explain a little bit more what it means, but this basically means that complete means that all the true theorems can be derived, and consistent means that no false theorem can be derived. Okay, so they say, okay, this is the period, the final work. We formalized mathematics. Okay, so they thought, but this is actually not true. So this is an axiomatic systems. Okay, so you have all the true statements about, for example, in this case, number theory. Okay, so they wanted to be complete and consistent. So the perfect axiomatic system, complete and consistent, is a system that is able to derive all the true statement and no false statement, okay, starting from a finite number of actions and following only mechanical inference rules. This is an graphical, simple representation of an incomplete axiomatic system. So you can derive some, but not all the true statements. But the important thing is that no false statement can be derived starting from the actions and using the mechanical inference rule. So this is incomplete. So you basically derive just a subset. This is an inconsistent axiomatic system. Okay, you can derive all the true statements. Actually, you derive all of them. Okay, but still you derive some false statement. Okay, still using the actions and the inference rules. So Gödel, you probably know this guy because it's always referred to the work of Whitehead and Russell. Gödel was a strange guy. It was a little bit bizarre guy. Actually, he died because at some point of his life, he thought that everything he was eating was poisoned. His wife tried many times to save him, but in the end, basically, the guy passed away. I mean, he was a very bizarre guy. He was not a conventional guy. He was probably one of the most genial person of the last century, but at the same time, his social life, his everyday life was a little bit strange. Not precisely when he was younger, but a little bit later. But still, like many of these mathematicians, he died relatively early. He was about 60. Some people like Turing, we mentioned, for other reason, died even before. So this is a picture when he was young. Why Gödel, the Austrian logic and mathematician, is so important for theory of computation and for mathematics and logic? Basically, the big goal, the big ambition of Russell and Whitehead of formalizing mathematics ended up to be impossible. Okay, so Gödel paradoxes we were discussing at the beginning. So Gödel said even more, because his statement can be generalized outside Principia Mathematica. And they say that in any interesting formal system, there are statements that cannot be proven either true or false. And by interesting formal system here, Gödel means that the system includes at least the formalization of arithmetics. So the conclusion is that okay, there is a theorem, there are proofs that we are not going to present here, but we will discuss during the course, and you can now find, of course, online books and papers on this. The conclusion is that all the logical systems of any complexity are incomplete. There are always statements that are true that cannot be proven within the system. So you will always have true statements, but you cannot formally prove. So this is interesting because my last webinar it was about components. It was a different topic, but there was an interesting question that was some guy asked, okay, Matt, can we have now at some point, we will ever have machines able to think and substitute humans in every task? And my answer was no, but not because it's not a matter of technologies. So there are mathematical truths that cannot be mechanically determined. Okay, so you cannot build. I mean, this is still an opinion, of course, because okay, there is some mathematical background who suggest me to conclude this, but okay, other people have different opinions. But in my opinion, and so I'm putting this as a question, can artificial intelligence defeat human cognition and consciousness when we know all the limits of logic and mathematics, computations, and mechanical reasonings? So this is an open question. I really hope that maybe many of you in the future will be able to put some light to, and maybe I'm not saying answer these questions, but maybe giving a better understanding. So computation is a general term for any type of information processing that can be represented as an algorithm, though that means mechanically. Algorithm was one of the first people describing, the Persian mathematician described a specific set of steps to achieve a goal. So this is why the word algorithm stems from his name. So this procedure can be as simple as adding two numbers, or converting a decimal number into its binary representation, finding the greatest common divisors of numbers, and these kind of things. Theory of computation in our course, but in general, explores things like mathematical definition of the intuitive notion of algorithm. He explores more formal definition of computation, and especially this is one of the most important things that I emphasize so much in this talk, and I will always emphasize in other talks and in the course. We want to explore the limitations of computation, because it's understanding the computation of the limitation of computation that we understand what computation really is, what we can do, what we cannot do, or what can be basically automatized and what cannot be. Just one last slide, because we don't discuss much the work of this guy, but this is a British mathematician, Alan Turing, who died very early. But this is another long history that I leave to the people studying history of computer science. People like Cliff Jones and Newcastle, they've wrote about this. So this guy created the model of computation that we know today. So what is called the von Neumann architecture, so the typical architecture of computers with processor, memory, disk, etc. It's basically a variation, a simple variation of the Turing machine. So he invented the model of computation. And he demonstrated that many interesting things. One of these is called halting problem. And the halting problem basically is the demonstration that you cannot write an algorithm to analyze another algorithm and prove that the other algorithm terminates. So you cannot prove termination. And we said in computer science terms that what we said is that termination is undecidable. Okay, and this is very interesting word, but it takes a lot of time to discuss his work. The other guy, very important in the course, we will analyze the work of Turing, and we will analyze the work of Chomsky. Chomsky is still a living person, and is very famous now this day because he's taking care of politics. He's writing books about politics, and he's very critical about the U.S. foreign policy. But we don't really care about his political career, but we care about what he did in early stages of his life. He basically formalized a hierarchy, a structure of grammars, what they are called the Chomsky grammars, which are very important for computation, for algorithms behind compilers. So we will discuss this extensively during the course. So that's all. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm here to answer questions, and I will be available to answer questions, of course, offline later today and by email in the future. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mazzara. Thanks for your presentation. Yeah, and now it's time for your questions, guys, if you have any. Okay, we'll wait. Yeah, last time you asked a lot of questions and they were very interesting, right? So I hope this time it will be a couple of questions at least.
If we have time, I can give some details about the course description here.
Yeah, there are no questions now. Maybe
if there are no questions at the moment, maybe I can spend a few minutes on giving the details of the course.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Because it was just an introduction. So we have the course syllabus here.
Yeah.
So you can see that.
As soon as I get the question, I'll let you know. Okay? If you don't mind,
All
I'll
right.
interrupt
Okay.
you. Okay.
Okay. Sure. So, okay, a little bit about the background knowledge. The course is generally self-contained, okay? We assume that the students are approaching the topic for the first time. It would be preferable if the students, they have some basic notion of mathematics in terms of set theory, logic, and algebra. This may be a plus. Of course, we will recall most of the definition, most of the concept. But of course, it's much easier if you have this little understanding. So we will analyze the language properties, the operational languages, what is called creamy operator and regular expressions. This is a prerequisite to understand the Chomsky grammars and productions. So this is why I mentioned Chomsky. Chomsky is the hero of the first part of the course. Okay, so you will get to know this guy very, very well. Then we will study regular languages, finite state automata, etc. And the second part of the course, very important, is about Turing machine, universal Turing machine, the halting problem, the problem I mentioned before about determination, Turing computability, etc. And then the last bit, I didn't talk much about it during the presentation, it's about complexity theory. Complexity, while computation, it's about what can be calculated and what cannot be calculated. Complexity theory is about, let's put it very simple, about performance, about time costs of algorithms. Okay, so there are algorithms that can solve a problem more efficiently than others, and this is what complexity theory is about. The major book that I suggest is the Hopfroth-Hellman, Introduction to Automated Theory Languages and Computation. This is a relatively old book, but the theory didn't change since 1979. And of course there are other newer books, but the topics are the same over and over again. The course will be given over the semester. There will be 2 hours of frontal lectures and 2 hours of seminars and exercises weekly on average. So there will be a list of topics. The students will be asked to pick up a topic from that list, write an essay, and give a seminar. So this is very important, I think, also because academic experience is about being able to read, analyze, synthesize, and present to other people. So I'm expecting that the students will be able to present their understanding to others. This is always useful because every person approaching a topic always has a specific understanding, gives a flavor. So after year and year, you can still listen to the same topic presented by another guy and understanding some little bit, some variation, some flavor. So the students will be evaluated on the basis of technical competence, but also presentation and writing skill. There will be a midterm exam and a final examination. And pretty much the assessment is 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. So seminars, midterm exam, and final exam, they have pretty much the same weight. That's it.
Okay, thanks. Professor Mazzara, we received one question from Mansour Hazaev. Are you ready to listen to it?
Yeah.
So the question
Sure.
is about the following thing. Is one of the main ideas driving reasoning out of several simple predicates? in which field the theory of computation can be used in particular?
Theory of computation is behind everything you can see today about computer science. So it's basically the theory behind compilers. Okay, so when you use a compiler to write a program, you don't need to know, because things are made in a way that are transparent to you. But you have to understand that every time you click compile on a button, that means that behind this there is the work of these people I mentioned and much, much more. So basically, theory of computation is the basic, the very fundamental thing about computer science. Every time you write a computer program, whatever it's a web application, whatever is a mobile application, whatever is a social network, Facebook, Google, you need theory of computation. You don't need to know theory of computation, but you have to know that theory of computation is behind. Okay, so I think that the difference between a simple programmer and a computer science, so the difference between a guy who can develop a mobile app and the guy who knows computer science is in theory of computation and a few other topics. So you really this really makes the difference. It's like the difference between a person knowing very well physics and knowing very well how things works, and the person who's just doing philosophy and doesn't really know how the world is mathematic behind. So I think that to do philosophy, you have to know a little bit about the advancement of physics recently, like quantum mechanics, etc. At the same time, to talk about computer science, to write programming, to be able to determine changes in the future, you have to really understand how things work behind the scene. This is basically the theory behind the scenes of compilation. So the answer is all the topics.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, if you have any other questions related to theory of computation, or I don't know, maybe component-based software engineering, you're welcome.
I mean, every topic of computer science, I'm happy to try to give an answer. Of course, for some topic I not maybe have no experience, but I can try.
Yeah, you may also write your questions in Russian if you don't feel like, you know, writing in English. It's okay to write in Russian. I can translate it to Professor Mazzara. Yeah, if you can't come up with any questions, you may send them to us later to the email address I typed in the chat box. It's webinar@innopolis.edu.ru, and then I'll forward it to Professor Mazzara.
I'm happy to answer offline, because of course offline I can give more detailed answers. I can provide links, I can provide resources, books. Of course it's much better. So if people are maybe shy, of course I can answer offline.
Yeah, or maybe the topic is too complicated. That's why, because last time they asked a lot of questions, right?
Yeah, the topic is very foundational. It's really I cannot. I mean, the course is a difficult one. I cannot deny that it's a difficult one. It may be one of the most difficult, but I think it's really the course that is giving you the broad understanding and you will be able to connect the dots between the different fields of computing.
Oh, and by the way, we received another question from the same attendee, Mansour Hazeev. So he says, you told about limitation of the computation. You told about Gödel, about
yes.
that there is always an exception. How reliable is it to use the theory of computation in solving problems? So how reliable is it?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
All the theory that we use today, whatever it is, physics or something else, works until we find the limitations. Okay, of course we know limitation of science today. I mean, if you study people like Carnap and neo-positivism, we know what science can do and what cannot do. Despite the fact that today sometimes science is used like a religion, but that's not true. We know the limitation of what we can do. Theory of computation has its limits, but all the theory that has been developed behind compilers has the precise goal of making compilers work. Okay, So we know very well what can be done and what cannot be done. What is on the market today? Let's say on the market, it has been proven to work. Okay, so there is not the fact that I mentioned the limitation of computer science and of theory of computation doesn't mean that the tool and the compilers you find today are unreliable. Okay, because they use that part of theory that allow us to compile programs, so to pass from a high-level programming language to basically, in the end, machine code. Okay, so and we are able to do some static analysis. We can do type checking. We can do many things. So theory of computation as it is absolutely reliable theory, and it has the advantage that we know its limitations, so we are not attempting to do things that cannot be done. So the answer is theory of computation is extremely important for developing compilers and to some extent also for artificial intelligence.